Maxine Sussman's poems have appeared in US 1 Worksheet, a famous publication, Patterson Literary Review, the Journal of New Jersey Poets, Ekphrasis, Asphodel, Earth's Daughters, and elsewhere. She's won honorable mention in the Allen Ginsberg Poetry Contest and several other competitions. She's Associate Professor of English at Caldwell College, where she teaches literature and poetry. And she's currently working on a series of poems set in French-Canadian wilderness during the 1930s, which our group has been happy to have her share with us. And so here's Maxine.
Thank you, Ellen, very much. I want to thank all my friends at US 1 for their support and help. And it's a pleasure to read with Sandra and in such good company. First, I'll read some of the poems from the Gogama sequence. I've been working on it for a few years. The poems are based on the life of my father, Ben Sussman, the only Jew in the tiny town of Gogama in the French-Canadian bush country of northern Ontario during the Depression, the Great Depression of the 1930s. The first poem I'll read, get used to this. The first poem I'll read is titled, First Do No Harm. It's a reference to the Hippocratic Oath that doctors take when they graduate from medical school. The name Ironstone in the poem is the name of the older doctor who hired my father to do the daily work in the office. And Queens in the poem refers not to Queens College in New York, but to Queens University in Kingston, Ontario, my father's hometown. First, Do No Harm, April 26, 1936. Ironstone greets him in a three-piece suit. A week ago, he didn't know this place existed. Now he steps down from the train into Depression Gogama. Families doubled up, 2 to a shack. Payment in moose meat and fish. Dirt, street, low frame buildings scattered from station to sawmill, lake. Everywhere, piles of melting snow. He'll speak his pidgin French, hand out aspirin for everything people can walk away with, dole first aid to a town on relief, until his other life will seem like someone else's. Arts 30, second in his med school class at Queens, residency just behind him. Let's hope for the best, he'll say with beginner's authority, remembering the oath that at the time seemed lofty, sensible, easy to take. Dispensary is a poem about his daily medical practice. Poupor's Mill was the sawmill in town, the largest employer for the men in Gogama. Soulier's store was the one-room general store in town. And a few French terms, I'll try to use a French-Canadian accent. L'huile de foie de morue is cod liver oil, and mal de tête, levez les mains is, if you have a headache, raise your hand. Oh, and aspirin, in those days, aspirin came in different colors, but it was the same medicine. Dispensary. Rows of stoppers and starters. Giant jars of aspirin, a whole shelf of cod liver oil. Patients crowd the vestibule, spill onto the porch. Mothers with babies, men from Poupor's Mill, Kids sent for cough syrup or l'huile de foie de morue, not like Soulier's store where you have to pay. Aches and pains, the same complaints, seasonal miseries, tedious food dished out in stuffed houses, too much drink, or not enough. He works alone in the small office, sometimes must come outside and shout, "Mal de tête, levez la main." White aspirin for headaches, brown for toothaches and sore throats, gray for stiff joints, sprained ankles. Yet, people leave satisfied, given what they've come to expect. Firewood. The sound up north, chonk of blade on wood. 20 below, wood piles long as roads. Months of chopping to heat a cabin, quick early autumn to sudden late spring, then summer's chilly dawns and darks. The chore always waiting. A man's knitting. Never a time no need to do more. Enough put in. Each man hits a stride of his own. Upswing, then down, upswing, then down. The caulked walls of his heart pumping, a stroke for each plank winter sees through. Each thunk of the axe lighting sparks against black roots of ice. Long after dusk, well into night, lonely, comforting sounds. Someone splits a last few logs, even as cold fists close around each of the thin, lit houses. The next poem is about West Tree Lumber Camp. There were a few very large lumber camps scattered through the region around Gogama. The men would come mostly from eastern Quebec, many of them from the Gaspé Peninsula. It was a very poor fishing area on the east coast of Quebec. In the winter, the men couldn't go out to sea to fish, and the lumber companies would come through the towns and sign up the men and ship them west to work in the woods in northern Ontario. And montrer in this poem simply means show me. West Tree Lumber Camp, January 1937. Montrer, he says, then clamps the forceps and pulls the tooth. Teeth all Sunday afternoon. As man after man in musty wool layers sits head thrown back, mouth gaping bad breath through a winter's growth of beard. Hundreds brought by train from Gaspé into the woods for 10-hour days to tag, saw, fell, roll, haul, pile, load logs onto rigs, hurtling down the snow roads. $30 a month, and all they can eat. Muscles hard as logs, but teeth soft, pulpy stumps. The men crave fat, meat, sugar most of all, to burn fast as a saw chews trees. Biscuits and honey, flapjacks and syrup, beans sticky with molasses, pie, donuts, coffee thick with sugar, sweet reminders served on clanking plates. Hungry, impatient for home, 1,000 miles and months away. The men sit on benches at long board tables, like teeth set in a jaw. Sulfa was the first antibiotic. It was discovered in the mid-1930s. It was the forerunner of penicillin. And when sulfa came into use, doctors had a way of treating childhood infectious diseases. It made a very big difference in a practice like my father's. Sulfa, 1937. Cabin reeks of sickness. The smaller ones, kept away, stare into the room where the boy lies flushed. No fight left. The father picks at a fingernail. Mother sits heavy on the cot. They realize how things stand. He listens to strangling lobes. A year ago, just aspirin cracked the window, that was all. Now, they watch him grind a huge yellow pill into powder, dissolve it in some tea. The boy sips slowly, swallows. Next day, we'll be sitting up in bed. In this next poem, camp means it means a cabin in the woods. It has the same sense as a Canadian or Maine camp would be for us. And my father kept two doctor's bags ready for making house calls. One was a regular bag, and the other was an obstetrical bag, which he used for home deliveries. This poem is called Pluck. Summoned, he's hiked to the distant camp, OB bag strapped to his chest. The predictable, not something he counts on. She lies effaced in terror, this baby pounding for hours. Let's see, madame. Something's wrong. He knows before he's sure. Fingertips reaching in, feel not scalp, shoulder, agony to deliver. Rigid, her legs wide, eyes fixed. The child turned against her, strange man casting inside. His fingers probe the womb, touch his only way to see. Try and fail. Try once more. Finally, pry the shoulder free, twist the body into place. Now she can push. At 5 a.m., the baby comes. Dawn. The father, exuberant, fussing at the stove. Fresh coffee, bacon with eggs, right from the hen. All he'll be paid, best he's ever had. Gogama is built on a lake, one of many northern lakes in that part of Ontario, called Minnesinaqua. And the Kemp's Island, referred to in this poem, was a little island where my father and his friends would go in summer to swim, have picnics and parties. This is called Picnic. 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 Which of those three did you like best? Picnic, Lake Minnesinaqua. Hoots, laughter, splash of a dive from the cliff. Through near distant fog, he hears the gang in full swing. His boat nudges closer. The outboard's neutral putting parts the mist like tent flaps, moves toward unseen firs and ledges. His shirt, face, hair are fresh with droplets. So far, he can't spot the root-striped rock where he'll tip the motor, tie his boat with others, and scramble up the path. He hopes someone will notice before he turns visible, will slide partway down the slope to him. Not far off, a woman's voice, no one he knows, rings through the spray. He longs for even the wisp of a claim to someone he can wrap in a white shawl of love, as the fog wraps its arms around Kemp's Island. A blanket toss is a traditional way of saying farewell to someone. It's a custom borrowed from the Cree Indians, who also lived in that part of Ontario. And the bay blanket that I talk about in this poem is a Hudson's Bay blanket, and you probably know what those look like. They're those heavy white woolen blankets with the red, black, yellow, and green stripes on them. The Hudson's Bay Company at that time was the largest mail order business up in the North Woods. It was how people got the staple goods that they couldn't find in a store like Soulier's. Blanket toss, 1940. Gleaming faces ring the dark like moons. Fists grip the rim of wool like crimping on pie crust. Send him flying, but not far. Sag and swing of arms, chest heaving with his weight. He's their fish, fair game. Caught as the blanket bells to ground, expelled as their shoulders pull it taut. Midair, he knows how they uplift, embrace his downfall, too. Maybe he's on his way up, off balance under the big top's constellations, thumps the rough head of the human drum, his neck, back, buttocks rolling in that membrane. He'll leave as he'd arrived 5 years before. Single, cheerful, wanting to make a go of things, seething inside at his snowed-in life. No way to see 15 years ahead, the gift scissored in half. Bright-colored bands of bay blanket tucked around 2 sleeping children in a bedroom near Manhattan. And the next poem is the last poem I'll read from the series. It's the epilogue. And my father developed his own x-rays in a makeshift darkroom in the basement of our home in Mount Vernon, New York. This is Epilogue, 1959. Start again. Epilogue, 1959. Pungent smell of vinegar, ripe fruit. Maybe this is what it's like to be dead, seeing nothing. The door has shut. We crowd in with our father, eyes adjusting slowly to total dark. Then almost dark, lit by one red bulb. We wait for his Dracula laugh. Deep, deliciously scary. He has set the kitchen timer. We don't move, must not touch anything, jostle his work, or be splashed by chemicals as we feel him pivot inches away, submerging films on metal frames into steel vats, lifting them from solution when time is up. He can read the secrets of strangers. Around us, forms emerge from negatives. Shadow tissue inside the dark room of ribs. This poem is about my own childhood, and I'm going to read two other poems, one for my son, one for my daughter. This is Legacy. A woman with taste, so I was taught, could furnish her home even at Woolworth's. Grandma went there to buy bud vases, figurines, picture frames, hairpins, stockings called nylons. Once or twice a year, I was allowed to touch her miniature collection and remove from behind glass my favorite, the 1-inch porcelain Scotty, then carefully put it back. Small hands and feet are the signs of a lady, said Mommy, her own shape cinched to perfection. But Grandma was a real one. At her cameo at her throat, and always a hanky, high-heeled size 4 satin slippers. And when I got older and she got sick, one day she had to ask me to help her off the toilet. And I saw the tiny nakedness that one day would be mine. Teenager with pneumonia. Sick as you are, do you know I am not unhappy? I can reclaim you, touch your forehead, your shoulder, prop you up to the cup you sip, lean into your hollow back, even lie next to you while you lie locked, frozen in a curl by spasms of chill, feeling my warmth unclench and unroll you. Your great-grandfather died of this. You now lie waiting for a drug that would have saved him to save you, and it will. I watch by your bedside, unused to being here now that your door stays closed. I bend to this luxury of doing and tending a cloth, a drink, a pill, enjoy my servitude and your tired eyes letting me, your scrawny arms reaching from the covers to take what I can bring. Downtown birthday. The middle portion of our time together, more or less, and 30 years ahead of me, your grandmother waits in the dementia wing of Sunrise Assisted Living. Your 25th birthday. We dine in the West Village at a Roman osteria with authentic tiny courses. Our goateed waiter with a tin ear for Italian doing his best with a specialità di giorno. Through the blurred hum from other tables, we lean close on our elbows over the white cloth. Talk about everything I kept at arm's length from her. who now can't remember anything I say. 25 years ago, you and I lay under a hospital sheet, nuzzling and rooting, learning who began, who ended where. Now, we do something akin from opposite sides of the table, trade sips of wine, taste from both plates, knowing ourselves in each other's faces, finding ourselves in each other's minds. The next poem is called Work in Progress, and it's about me as a student in a writing workshop. But since I'm a teacher, I'm also very interested in the relationship between teachers and their students. There was a young woman in the workshop, and in the second stanza, she tells me her secret. Work in progress. In class, she barely speaks, writes brief poems about bad boys, lost causes, her voice a penciled lowercase I. We others, older, answer gingerly. Some boy who takes her beneath a railroad trestle, another she's with on an interstate at 3 a.m., scribbling their initials on metal mirrors. One who passes out, so she wakes alone on someone's floor. We might envy her a little. And then tells me that for years she's modeled for a drawing class. On the surface where she poses, rules require no one touch. Not even the teacher may move a single hair with his fingertip, adjust her by a fraction, unless she says yes. In that cube of space, she's absent from her own being present, avoiding all but eyes that penetrate but cannot brush her skin or what's beneath her most still life. For that hour, devoid of desire, she's perfectly safe. The last poem I'm going to read is Florist Woman, and it's about the fossil that was discovered last October in a cave on the island of Flores in Indonesia. A 3-foot tall woman is estimated to be only 18,000 years old. And this fossil have scientists and anthropologists, I suppose especially, speculating that she might be a newly discovered species of human. Florist woman. She dreams of slaying dragons, thrusting shards into giant Komodo hides, bloody incisors, ropey tails, ferocious on the prowl. Though sluggish when sated, as night cools, her little brain makes note. Until then, she waits, curled on the cave floor with others, diminutive by first fire. Jungle island. Her skull, no bigger than a chimp's, discovered with bones and tools. Predator and prey. Sapiens have never been alone. Somewhere, tiny versions of ourselves gather, couple, hunt, scamper for cover. Dozens of centuries until some waist-high human will find our cave, sift through 20 feet of silt, unearth our monstrous brains, dreaming of survival.
Thanks, Maxine. Those are really nicely read. Beautiful. Just take another quick break and then we'll have our open mic if you haven't signed up yet. Okay, so we have 8 very brave poets lined up here. I'll call out the 3 and then you can just sort of serve yourselves here. So it'll be, first up will be Jim Weldon, Liz Sokolow, and then Shanti.
The title is Bad Walter on the Origins of Baseball. What God created were forces. Parmenides was already there with perfection. He pitched God the hard ball, a totally perfect dead ball pitch that thudded like a rock into God's hand, causing bone bruises. God invented myths and the microcosm, which was specifically for baseball, he said. He devised a strong force that drove fans together in ballparks. He tied up a lot of energy keeping quarks and muons together inside the ball, and electrons that livened it up. And he made gravity the weak force. So there were more home runs, more excitement on the bases. His greatest innovation was statistics, which meant in time anything could and would occur. And indeed, the Red Sox won 8 postseason games in a row, and also the World Series. Einstein would have been disgusted, just as Steinbrenner was, because that made baseball a game of chance. Time and change and statistics and a strong force, not to be measured by Steinbrenner's macrocosmic maneuvering. Thank you.
Today noticed that the Contemporary Verse 2, one of the literary magazines of Canada, had just given me first prize for this poem about Cynthia. And so I figured it was fated that I come here. Cynthia Gooding was a flamenco singer, a blues singer, and had spent many years in Seville. The magazine put 10 words on the thing and gave us 48 hours to write no more than 50 lines. And I looked at the words. The first one was bodega. I thought of Cynthia in Seville, went to sleep. It's a little like Coleridge. And I woke up and took an hour and wrote this, tinkered another hour and sent it off. So I'm very surprised. But it does evoke her stories. It's everything I remembered of her. It's called July 1969. In the bodega in Seville, the oranges and baskets at the front of the small corner shop, its cool marble floors and drooping bougainvillea on the trellis at the door, the casual abundance of fuchsia flowers, all breathed together with garlic, gossip, and hope, and with the yeasty peasant bread in baskets that flanked the oranges at the entrance to the store. The pulling in of the stomach, arching of the back is, in that atmosphere, automatic in all young women. They conspire in half-conscious imitation of the figure in all the plastered posters, the flamenco dancer, her fan, half-hidden face, and black lace torsions that emanate restraint and sex. I cannot help it, necessita. I tell myself here, where the hourglass announces at each blank space the brevity of youth, the body's mortality we cannot circumvent, no matter the cryings and turnings, the local music thrumming in the night. Black satin droops, brief bougainvillea, white gardenias on the body of so little time, paper legend hung slightly crooked, on the ancient stucco above a modern slatted vent to the street. I duck under the arch, pendant flowers, and deep green leaves. I enter the bodega, 21 years old, a girl bent on having a cigarette, sold then singly, a Chesterfield, a Camel, no filters. The proprietor, not busy enough past the hour of newspapers, shows me the joke on the back of the Camel packet, trying to let me linger with him in the shuttered light. Where do I want to sleep? Ver dodo, he asks, mistaking me for French. Under the pyramid, the palm tree, or the camel? His shoulders bobble in a silent laugh. I let him turn the package over as if I were a child and didn't know the palace on the front. He pulls a single perfumed stalk of shredded weed from its nest. The Americans have just finished their current orbit of ambition by landing on the moon. Where are the women, our tides, our oceans and desire, if not here in Seville, singing flamenco, dancing with fans, our loyalty to our connection to our men, its heat, the invisible pull of birth and blood to the moon's silent reach.
Seems to be a night for family poetry. This is almost family, not quite. It's called International Exchange, and few of you have heard this recently. It's an old poem, 1959, spring 1959. There was such a year. Those of you who've come from abroad or first generation abroad, you generally find an affinity with some local groups. And somehow, most of the foreign students I knew in Berkeley or in Cambridge or wherever, they hung out generally with East Coast or Brooklyn Jews. And it's maybe they were from New Jersey, but we always thought they were from Brooklyn. And so and I spent a year at MIT where the professors were very bright. The secretaries were brighter. They generally all had Phi Beta Kappas and wrote better English. And so when the professor's paper came out, you could tell who wrote it really finely. And I was lucky enough to know one of them who fell in love with me or thought she fell in love with me. She really wanted somebody else, but I would do. And this is where I first learned the term bait and switch. And she, after the whole thing was over, I went back to Berkeley, and she got her man, and she said she found him, whom I had met incidentally. She says, he's Jewish, which is fine with my parents, and he doesn't look Jewish, which is fine with me. And it's nothing personal. So it's called international exchange. The Hindu, incidentally, a Hindu can be an atheist, which most Hindus don't know. The Hindu came and saw the Jew and the Gentile on the karma kick, the kismet of comfort, the divinity of Cretan cooperation, and left wondering to cry or to laugh, for himself that is, and Jerusalem that was, at history finding destiny and man losing destination. The Hindu that was struggled for rebirth, mumbling, this flux, this maya. Why let an illusion become an affliction, an affection? The whispers died, the river Charles carried away the ashes of a still rebirth. The Hindu was not crying, not laughing, but thinking. The yarns of Maya, illusion, may bedeck Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles and Back Bay in Boston, while Jerusalem may yet be rebuilt on the Ganges. I would take 30 seconds. Is that all right? Can I take 30 seconds? This was more recent, again, in the tradition of my religiosity. My father, who is in heaven, when he was on earth, if he were like God, or if he had been like God, I would have run away from home.
Good evening. I always introduce myself as I'm not a poet. Well, I'm not a poet, but I present poetry as a performer does poetry. And before I go any further, I want to announce that Sandra Gash and Jim Weldon will be reading at the Cafe Improv April 23rd. This poem is by Jim Weldon, and it's another way of presenting poetry, and I'm always looking for that. The Runner by Jim Weldon. I ache in the arms to run more after running hard and far and good, and I want to run more acres forward and sideways in instants. It's a jumble, a rush. I come off too soon. There's more of me to run. There are laps around the oval for me to experience. Animal. I want to become just the shine in my eye. The shoulders loose. I go let walk.
Maureen Wiener. I wrote this poem after a reading at Princeton University, but not the one that I went to today. Is this right? Autograph party. After she misspent her youth, sent her children away, betrayed her country, burned her chairs, table, house to feed her fire, broke off being a wife and shamed her lovers, caused her mother to be spat upon in the public square. After she learned to tell not the truth, but a truth and another, truth and another, upraising the dark lamp of early harm that calls out shadows in the others, she's earned a name and the right to read before this small audience of the callow and the balding, the uncomprehending, the appalled, leaning heavily first on the chairman's arm, then on the lectern. Then some come up praising her earliest work that she likes least, and curious about the life, and saying they think they'd like to do the same, always meant to, mean to someday. And I'm going to read another poem because Sandra said she liked this poem, and it's called A Gift of Soap. The soap on my skin this morning told me, practice love. Love the legs with their veins and scars. Love the cracked feet, the freckled hands. The soap said, touch the skin, linger over the tender places. Your palms and fingers see better than eyes. Take comfort, care for the damaged and whole, the scarred and smooth. Take your wrinkled life, learn how to make a husband of your hands. The soap is heavy and good. I know it will last.
I'm Jane McKinley.
This is a poem I wrote after driving home from US 1 Poets one foggy night last fall. It's called The Way Home. In the fog, the road unwinds, one frame at a time, familiar route reduced to isolated fragments, curves and straights, sketched haze of dotted lines, edges blurred to nothingness. Without landmarks, I could miss a turn, end up at someone else's house, in someone else's life. A flash of owl blinds me as it rises, wings outstretched, pale shock of underfeathers caught by headlights in the margin, talons clutching something still alive. The dark road beckons, draws me back, but owl figment lingers on my retina, augur of wings unfurling, taking flight.
I've learned not to use any words that start with P. Gee, that's a shame, because this is called the plum string. Many people who are much more familiar with poetry than I are familiar with the William Carlos Williams poem, This Is Just a Say. And this is actually going to be 4 poems. That one is we'll just ignore the P. That is the source. And then on a website, somebody put an answer poem to that. And of course, this was all new to me, the first poem, the second poem. Then a man whom I was hopelessly and madly and desperately in love with posted a third one, and I posted my own erotic reply, which of course he got, and probably a lot of other people as well. Anyway, this is called the plum string. I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious. So sweet and so cold. Now, this is an answer by someone named Erica Lynn Gambino. I have just asked you to get out of my apartment, even though you never thought I would. Forgive me. You were driving me insane. All right, this is Ken Brown's. I have eaten the plums that were in my icebox, which you knew nothing about since you were not there, and which I was not saving for anything. They were sweet and cold, and then you came over and drove me insane until I threw you out, and we never forgave each other. And here's my answer. I am one of the plums that is in the icebox. All this waiting is driving me insane. I am delicious, so sweet, and so cold. Forgive me, but I don't want to be saved. Eat me now. Thank you.
Winter walk on the canal. Hair days. Ash, maple, oak trees, tightly strung along the canal, uniformly lean to reflect upon winter's sad effect on mains. Out of step with the regiment, verve in its hips, no care about reflection or hairstyle, a linden nimbly swirls skyward. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I just want to remind people that on April 27th, we have Robert Connervalli and John Falk, and then on May 25th, we have Madeline Tiger and Wanda Praisner. So I'll see you back then.